Hi everybody, and welcome back to another edition of CCMA Kids. I'm Justin Whitty, the curator of the Cleve Carney Museum of Art, and today we're going to do part one of a three-part project of designing and painting your own personal crests. What is a crest? Well, a crest is a pictorial symbol of a family or an individual, or you may most often see them or recognize them as the badge or logo of a sports team. So what we're going to do today is talk about some of the basic elements you need to come up with to design your own crests and come up with your design. In the following weeks, we'll scale them up and then ultimately paint them for display. All right, shall we get started? So when we think about designing a crest, if you look at examples that you may be familiar with, you can see that there's some few basic elements. One is the shield or the shape of the 2D design. So the first thing we're going to do is decide what shape we want our crests to be. Some common options often used are, circles, sometimes you see kind of shield shapes, maybe with a little dip at the bottom. Within shields, you could have variations. So in addition to the dip at the bottom, there could also be kind of a bump at the top, so it really looks like a shield. So why don't you take a few minutes and draw a bunch of different shapes that you think might be a good idea for your crest, and be as creative as you want. It doesn't have to be any of these. You can really make it any shape you want. Really, the more interested you are in the shape, the more interesting your final crest will be. So I'm just going to draw a few more ideas too while you draw yours, all right? Okay, so I have some different ideas of shapes, and I hope you do as well. And what we're going to do now is choose which shape we want to work with. And I think I'm going to go ahead and work with kind of this standard shield shape, okay? Now you may choose to work with a circle or a square or whatever shape you want. It doesn't matter. Again, this is about your own crest, so it should be individual to your tastes and likes. So now, having decided on the shape, we're going to decide a few more things about that back part, or a few more details about that shape. So for instance, if I start with my general shape, to think, is it going to have kind of an edge, like a double line maybe around the edge here? Or maybe even a triple line. Or I guess if you look at the negative space, that is actually just a double line, but it's made up of three lines, right? Because they define the outside of the thicker negative space line. Okay? So again, just like we did with the shape, you could pause the video for a second and play around with some different details on the shape of your crest. Okay, so now you have your crest shape decided, you've decided on details. I'm gonna go ahead and stick with kind of my double line option here. Now the next thing we want to think about is there a pattern that we want to be in the background in the center of our crest? So what's going to fill this area? And what I often like to do is to think of a fun pattern. So let's get a new sheet of paper here. We'll set this one aside. Go ahead with the shape you decided on. So again, mine was that really kind of classic shield-like crest shape. And then I had the double line. Now I want to come up with a pattern on the inside. So just to review, a pattern is the repetition of shapes. So usually can often be simple geometric shapes like lines or squares or circles that are repeated over and over again to make a nice repeating pattern like you'd often see on clothing or in wallpaper. So this pattern is going to go behind text or images that will be on the very top layer of our crest. So we have to think, we want something that looks good, but it's maybe not too distracting from what we eventually put on top. So for example, we could, if I wanted, maybe have diagonal stripes. Okay. So again, like the other two options, there's really no limit in what you can decide. It's just up to you. So let's take a few minutes and play around with some different ideas that you have for the patterns for the back of your crest. Okay, so hopefully now you have some different ideas of what patterns you might use. These little quick drawings, by the way, that you use to help develop a design are called thumbnails. So sometimes you might hear someone say, make a thumbnail sketch, or refer to something as a thumbnail sketch. It's usually a small little drawing to help give the idea of what's being done. And I think it's called thumbnail because they're small, kind of like, you know, the nail on your thumb, although that looks like it's a little bit bigger than my thumb. So now looking at your designs for patterns, again, you're going to choose one. And again, I'm going to go with my first, just like these diagonal lines. So I'm going with that one. You can go with whatever you like. So the next step now is an important one. We are going to decide and then design the lettering that will go into the center of your crest. Now this could be your name, it could be your family name, your last name, it could be the name of your street or your school. For me, I think I'm just going to do initials. SW, which stands for Shriner Whitty, which is my family last name. So I'm going to think about a way to draw an S and W to be in the center of the crest. So to do this, again, I'm just going to start with the crest shapes. And again, you can be working with pencil. I'm just using this marker so you can see the lines I draw. Because especially now as we're getting to the design part where we're going to start overlapping elements, having a pencil and eraser might be helpful. What also is helpful is even though we decided on the pattern first, since in the design, the pattern will go underneath the letters. When we draw the letters, we're going to draw the letters first and then put the pattern behind it. So, have our crest. And the first thing to think about is the size of the text you're doing. Is it going to fill the whole crest? Is it going to come down at an angle? Is it going to be across the bottom? Are some of the letters going to overlap on top of each other? So what I think I'm going to try in this first one is make a big S. And I'm going to do it kind of curvy with some serifs on the edges of the S. Serifs are these little bits at the end of a letter that kind of flare out. So I'll do a big S. See how it's going right to the edges of the interior of the crest. Do a big S. And then I might just have my W be up in this top part. And then I can imagine how that pattern would look behind it. So whenever you're drawing, especially when it's 2D design, just designed elements, so shapes and lines and letters, it's always important to have a good idea of stacking. So what you want in the end to look like it's on top, you have to draw it in a way so it appears on top. So we want the SW, or I want this SW to look like it's on top. So that's why I drew it first and then drew the pattern behind it where it stops, where it hits the edge of the SW. So the pattern looks like it's behind those letters. So again, you can play around with different ways to write your initials, your name, whatever you want. You can use letters that are thicker, sans serif letters that don't have any flares on them, right? Kind of chunky letters. You could play around with more cursive letters, kind of script letters. So you did something like a little fancier. You could play around with really blocky letters. You could do letters at an angle. All sorts. You could do something just crazy, fun letters, like cloud letters, letters that look like they're made out of tree branches. So that's like a cloud letter. If I do this one here, imagine that W. Tree branches. Or maybe there's a way you already write your initials or the word that you want to write in your crest. So again, let's take a few minutes, play around with some different ideas of both the look, the style of the letters, and the placement within your crest. And then we will come back and talk about the final 2 steps for today. Okay, so I have a few thumbnail sketches, and you should too, of what text you're going to have in your crest and how it's going to sit in there. Right now, I can't decide between this kind of more fun, abstract one and this more classical one. Stick with this one for now, because it'll be easier to show the next steps, but I might also do this one. I don't know. We'll see how I'm feeling. Okay, so now we have our shape. We have the shape's detail. We have the pattern that we want, and we have the letters. So the last thing that we want to do is think of an image that can be kind of the logo for whatever it is you're making this crest for. If it's you, maybe it could be something. If you're really into bicycling, it could be an image of a bike. If it's for a sports team you're on and your mascot is a wildcat, it could be maybe the head of a wildcat. If you're really into airplanes, maybe it's an airplane. So why don't you take a minute and think about what is a symbol or an image or a thing that you really associate with yourself or whatever group you may be making this crest for. So, for example, mine is the Schreiner Witties, which is my family. And we have a pet beagle named Cuba, who we all love very much. So I think I might include some drawing of her as that symbol, because she's also part of the family. So I could decide to do maybe just a beagle head. Right? Or maybe I could do the outline of a beagle's body. Or maybe a beagle head from the front. I'm not sure. So why don't you take a few minutes to decide what it is you want to represent and how you might want to show it. Okay, and I'm going to play around with a few different ideas as well. So, you see, I thought of maybe a different head, or sitting, or a silhouette with a beagle barking, because beagles bark a lot. And I think I might go ahead with this one. Now we're going to figure out where on our designs, where our image is going to go. So, again, we start with our shape. That up a little bit. There we go. You can always just make corrections right on the page and keep drawing. That's the beauty of a sketch. Don't worry so much about a line if it goes out of the way. Just draw a line that's correct. Keep going. Sometimes if we get too worried about being perfect right away, you get frozen. You're not able to do anything at all. Because really, nothing in the world is perfect. So if you're stuck on waiting for perfection, you're just gonna be stuck. Down here. So, why don't you go ahead and play around with ideas of placement of your image within your crest, okay? It can be down in the center, it could be large. If you even want it, it could be below or alongside. Just go ahead and do as many little thumbnails as you want to get that placement correct. Okay, so now we have our design. Good job today. Next week, we're going to work on scaling up your designs to a larger size. We'll also start working on deciding the colors for your final crest. So, if you want to join me next Tuesday, please come back with a pencil, a ruler, a marker, colored pencils if you have them, or crayons is fine. And it would be great if you could have a larger sheet of paper, about 18 inches by 24. If not, no big deal, we'll still figure it out. All right, I'll see you next time, and thank you.